want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. We're kind of between drafts, but we're going to specifically touch on the NBA draft on this week's The Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. He has some thoughts on what's going on in the NBA right now, but we've set up a whole big discussion about that this week, Greg. This is all you're doing, so how are you doing? And then we can get into how our thoughts the last few weeks of the NBA, because that's been fascinating here in Detroit.
Yes, and it absolutely has been. Thanks, Big Al. I am Greg Eno from the WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And my latest piece was about Troy Weaver and about his plan. Check me out on Out of Bounds. And this is kind of we decided, there were so many newsy things that happened with the Pistons over the past week.
Newsy?
That we said,
yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, say the least.
we said, let's bring Siddy Hall on, our NBA expert, our stats guru. Let's bring him on. And then the more we talked about how much there was to talk about and how we know how good Siddy is at talking about these things, we said, well, let's just talk about the Pistons all for the entire show.
Right.
There's not really a lot. The Red Wings haven't named a coach yet. The Tigers stink. Nothing going on with the Lions really right now. So why don't we just kind of devote this program to the Pistons, which we've kind of not talked a lot about recently. So, and frankly, we had Siddy on May 31st on the anniversary show, and the roster has changed so much since then. So what we're going to do for you now is play for you a pre-recorded interview with Siddy Hall that's going to take up about 50 minutes of your time. But it's a lot of fun. We had a lot of good stuff. We touched on a lot of points with Siddy. He's got a lot to say about the moves. And he's not as doom and gloom as I thought he might be. He's actually pretty positive. So that was kind of fun. So let's listen to that interview right now. Well, the Pistons had one of the most newsworthy and newsmaking weeks that I can recall in many, 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 many years. And when something like that happens, we just have to ask our resident NBA and Pistons expert, Siddy Hall, to join us, the stats guru, help us break it all down. And he's with us on the other end of our line, all the way out there in Brazil. Siddy, how you doing tonight? Thanks for doing this.
Doing well. Hi, Al. Hi, Greg. Thank you for bringing me back so quickly. It's only been a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens when these off seasons turn into what they've turned into here in Detroit. And so much has happened since you joined us on May 31st. It's almost the roster has been turned halfway upside down. We had the draft, of course, and there was the Jerami Grant trade. And we had a trade last night, Tuesday night, with the Knicks, and a draft night trade, and all sorts of the players were getting let go today. Frank Jackson's gone, Luka Garza's gone. So I guess the best thing to do is Siddy, is maybe just take this in kind of chronological order and kind of help us walk us through what happened and why it happened and what the fallout might be. We'll start with the Grant trade. Of course, that was the trade they made with the Trailblazers that netted.
Now, hold on. You said the fallout. That means it's going to be negative.
Well, because I know you're going to rain on the parade. Everybody's giddy on Twitter. Everybody's happy, and you're going to bring us all down with why it's not good. I know how you are. You're very pessimistic. So I'm already using these words like fallout because I know you're going to bring us all down. But the Grant trade was made last week, a couple days before the draft. First round pick, the 2025 Milwaukee Bucks first round pick came to Detroit. First, let's just kind of talk about Grant being traded, period. Let's not necessarily talk about what the Pistons got back. Surprised, not surprised. I personally am not surprised, but let's hear your take on that.
Well, there have been rumors about Grant for a while, and I was always a little bit of a doubter about the authenticity of them, other than the fact that he is a guy who's in demand. But it happened, Reaction was one of sadness. I'm a Jerami Grant fan, and I had been imagining this Piston team and how it would look with him. And it took me a while to kind of get my head around the team without him. And, it's a less exciting team without him, to be honest. But Troy Weaver is showing fiscal restraint that is very rare in the NBA.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes sense. And I do give him credit for that. It's not a clear black and white situation if it was good or bad, but that's the path they're taking. And he showed it again with the trade involving Nerlens Noel and Burks. Kind of split the difference on picking up a splashy free agent or being a warehouse for bad contracts. And instead we got pieces that will work for a little while and smaller draft picks. But overall, the signal is fiscal restraint. And I suspect what they're really doing is preparing for the rookies. This is an 8-year plan. We're entering year 3. They're preparing for the future contracts and having space for Cade and Bay and Beef Stew. It's closer than you think. 2 years from now, they're going to have to ante up. 3 years from now for Cade, who's on his way probably to being a max guy. Mm-hmm. So the money's going to be there, and if they continue to show this restraint, they're not going to be in that such a common situation where teams are trying to unload money. It's different. It's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And when you look at their roster, I'm going down and looking at. I'm sorry, I'm getting away from your chronological order. We'll get back to the Grant move.
That's all right.
But if you look at their core group, in the core group, I mean the young guys, I have a list of, I'm looking at 11 names, the oldest of which, believe it or not, is Isaiah Livers at age 24.
Jeez.
Yeah, and the player with the longest tenure is actually, good Lord, is... how come I'm drawing a blank on the point guard? Yeah, Killian Hayes. He's got the longest tenure. Hard to believe. That is something else.
Right.
And remember, 3 years ago, this team had Blake Griffin and was in cap hell, which is amazing.
That's right. We had Blake. We had, before that, lots of mid-sized contracts. Yeah. Remember, we had Avery Bradley and making $18 million a year or whatever it was.
Oh, God, yeah. I remember the hype around Avery Bradley, yes.
So, but anyway, think about this, just taking a step back, what's happening here? Got the core group, young guys. It starts with Cade, Sadiq Bey, and Jaden Ivey. And we were talking about this, Greg. They need a nickname, right? Is it Cade, Bey, and Jade? Is it Jade, Bey, and Cade? How are we going to refer to these guys for the foreseeable future? But that's the core. Ages 21, 23, and 20. Right. Then you got the second group, which I identify as Beef Stew, Bagley, and Jalen Duren. Mm-hmm. Ages 21, 23. Duren will be 18 when the NBA season starts. He turns 19 in November.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then you got like the third group, like the maybe guys, and that's Killian Hayes, Amadou Diallo, who's also 24, and Livers, who's 24. Those are the graybeards of the group. And then you have the rookie from Italy, the second-round pick. What's his name? Gabriel Procida, who's 20, and then there's Saban Lee, who's 23. That's 11 guys. Mm-hmm. So you see all this money available, and people are already talking about money being available next year. Next year they're going to have to decide on Diallo. Right now they're deciding on Bagley. And then 2 years from now it's going to be Bay and Killian and Beef Stew. Mm-hmm. Then followed by Cade Cunningham. So I'm wondering if, they're just going to continue and show this amazing financial restraint and just wait for these guys to get to that second deal. And then, start slotting them according to importance and, getting that taken care of and then filling in the spaces around them. And then basically, once they get those guys signed into the second deal, that'll be year 5 of the, I'm talking about Sadiq Bey and Killian too. That'll be year 5 of the 8-year plan. And then maybe that's when you bring in the free agent if there is money available.
Right. When you say bring in the free agent, you mean try to bring in a splash guy, a really big name guy? Is that what you're talking about?
If the money is there, if the opportunity is there, and by then, we should be seeing progress. The team will be maturing, and I don't know. I'm just guessing, but that's what it looks like to me. Because why else would you bring in Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks? They have 1 year left plus a team option. They're kind of like placeholders, it seems like, and guys that will keep the team from just constantly be struggling.
Right.
And the pain of that. Try to be competitive without, making these commitments like with Jerami Grant, which would have been basically 5 years, 1 year, the final year of his deal, plus 4 more potentially. They're avoiding that. So,
we're talking with our NBA expert, the stats guru, Siddy Hall here in the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg, from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and of course Big Al Beaton is here. Let's bring Big Al in. What you have for Siddy Hall?
Well, going back to the Jerami Grant trade, and I know at least with the fan base, the original reaction when it first went down was that's all we got. Essentially a draft pick, probably a draft pick well into the 20s 3 years from now, plus flipping second round picks, and I guess people suddenly were reminded as these days have gone on since that trade that it's pretty much obvious when Troy Weaver makes a deal, he's thinking 3, 4, 5 steps down the line, and it took up to draft day for people, over a few days for people to realize he actually has a plan, and I think people needed to be reminded of that because sometimes I think when Weaver said, I'm not skipping any steps, and I think that's what we're seeing with him right now because I'm kind of thinking, there are fans out there who want that splash signing right now. We're going for, say, Brunson or Ayrton or there's the Bridges, for example. And it really feels like Weaver says we're not ready to make that move yet, which is essentially what you've pretty much just been saying.
And almost nobody has that kind of self-restraint.
Yes.
His old boss in Oklahoma City does. He's the guy who's been using that cap space as a warehouse to store bad contracts and get assets while, letting young guys play and mature. It's that's how you're supposed to do it. Right. It's very hard to have that kind of discipline. So, again, back to Jerami Grant. I really enjoyed watching him play. He's unique. There aren't many guys like him. He's in the prime of his career. He did have a little bit of trouble staying healthy. Right. But it was it's hard to see him go. But that double move of trading him, getting the first, and turning that into Jalen Duren. I'm having trouble with the Jalen.
Yeah, right. Jalen and Jaden.
Jalen Duren. This might be my favorite move of his because first off, let's compare the Grant trade to what happened last year. When think about Grant. We traded him without receiving equal salary back, and that changes the dynamics of trades. Yeah. And so if you look at last year, Weaver, in one of my least favorite moves of Troy Weaver, he had to have Kelly Olynyk. And in doing so, Charlotte was willing to take Plumlee without sending money back. They had a tax, a trade exemption or something that they could fill. And to pay Charlotte for doing that, we gave them the number 37 pick in the draft. And that to me was just agonizing. You know, we're so bad with our second rounders. We've traded so many of them away for nothing in return. The team is bad. The number 2 picks are high. They have value. And that pick actually came from Brooklyn for Bruce Brown.
Yeah.
It was the Toronto pick. It was like we got lucky. It was the one year when Toronto was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just gave it away. And that was the price we paid for them taking a deal without sending money back, you know. So with Jerami Grant, you know, same thing. You know, to send him to a team that had a trade exemption and didn't have to send money back, and we still got a first out of that. And at first glance, it was like, Milwaukee, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it was 3 years from now, and who knows, man? You know, Drew Holiday and Middleton would be old by then. Who knows what the value of that pick? But you know, they took on Kemba Walker, $9 million in today's NBA for getting into the first round, basically moving up 3 years and knowing exactly what we're getting, the 13th pick. That was slick. It was a slick double move. And he avoided tying up all that money with Jerami Grant.
And you send Grant out to Portland, well, he'll never hurt you. I mean, they never play the Blazers.
And don't forget that's also a place he wanted to go as well. Which is actually Weaver doing his guy a solid, which I'm sure players see.
Yeah, you know, he was taken care of, and I imagine, you know, they had to have been talking, you know, with his agent, how many years, how much money on the extension. He was eligible for 4 years at $28 million. That's getting pricey, you know.
Yeah.
And Jerami played 101 games over 2 years. You know, he's a hard driver, man. He lays on the floor a lot. So his body, he took some damage. You know, he's susceptible to injury.
Oh, yeah, we saw that this year, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm. Right. Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, let's talk about the draft itself. I mean, a lot of folks, Siddy, didn't think that Jaden Ivey would be there at number 5. There were, in fact, a lot of folks who were disappointed at the lottery that the Pistons did drop to number 5 because one of the reasons why was they didn't think that Ivey, who a lot of the fans in Detroit wanted for obvious reasons because of his ties to the area, simply didn't think he would be there. He would be gone when one of the first 4 picks. So lo and behold, he was there. Pistons grabbed him. The Knicks, I guess, tried desperately to pry Ivey loose.
Oh, it was for draft night. It was fascinating watching Knicks fans losing their minds over that. Oh, it was awesome.
And right, and Weaver didn't budge. He said, "Nope, Ivey's our guy." Mm-hmm. Talk about Ivey. I mean, what do you like about this kid? I know he's explosive. They say maybe his decision making once he makes that drive to the hoop needs to be improved, but I'm sure it can be improved. What do you like about this kid?
Well, hey, at least he can drive to the rim and he can distribute. I mean, not most guys can't do that. So right there, you're talking about his strength, really. Well, first of all, let's take a step back. You know, Pistons got a little bit lucky, I guess. We don't really know. We'll find out in the future. Right. But Sacramento got roasted because they violated the rule of not taking the best man available and went for need. And instead of like moving down a pick or two, because traditionally you can move down and find a taker and maybe pick up a future first or something. Right. And they didn't do that. But I had some deja vu, you know, because if you look back, you know, at when, you know, Van Gundy was here, he had to make a decision between a good guy, Luke Kennard, and an all-star, Donovan Mitchell. And he chose the good guy. Right. Then 2 years ago, you know, our guy, he had to choose between Killian Hayes and Tyrese Halliburton. And, you know, that was a bad move. You know, that was one of the worst moves of that's been going on, that's happened in the new regime. You know, Killian is, you know, backup material, it seems like. In Halliburton's, you know, borderline all-star. So twice we've been in a position where we've had choices of choosing guys from the same position, and we picked the wrong pony. And now this year it was a 3-man option. You know, we had the choice. Everyone wanted Ivy. And then there was the more polished, well-rounded Ben, what's his name?
Mathurin.
Arizona.
Mathurin, I believe.
Yeah. Mathurin, right. And then there's Shaedon Sharpe, who's kind of like the guy, you know, think of let's make a deal.
Yeah.
You know, do you want these guys or what's behind the curtain? You know, a little bit of the unknown. But these guys are all the same position, you know. So, you know, let's see if we pick the right pony this time. Now, to answer your question about Jay as a greyhound, he runs like a wide receiver in football. He handles the ball decently. He's got to improve his handle, but he can handle the ball. Purdue had him running the offense. He seems okay. He seems to understand where his shooters are. He doesn't look like a natural point guard, but at minimum, he's at least been working on his game to be a combo guard, a guy, you know, and when you have to have multiple points of attack in the offense. Last year, Cade was doing everything.
Right.
You know, because Killian just doesn't scare anybody, you know, and so he does. So now we have a 2-pronged attack, and then Saddiq Bey last year was working on his dribble drive game. It's going to be an alley-oop fest. You know, it's going to be Lob City. With all this height, with Noel and Bagley and Duren, they're going to be receiving alley-oops from Ivy and Cade. It's going to be exciting, you know. But the other thing about Ivy, you know, when I look at film, the first thing that jumps out at me, he's a bricklayer. This guy cannot shoot the ball well. He is not a natural shooter. He never will be. He's got to work on that. And we're going to see a lot of rookie season performances. You're going to look at that box score, 4 for 17, 2 for 15. There is going to be some growing pains.
But he provides a dimension, Siddy, and you touched on it. We both touched on it. He provides a dimension that the Pistons, I think, have been sorely lacking, which is that you mentioned Greyhound. I mean, the way he can get to the basket is really, I can't remember the last time the Pistons have had a player like that, really.
Well, he goes from foul line to foul line really, really quickly. Now, the question is, you know, he has to work on, you know, his finishing skills.
Right.
You know, he should be able to do that, you know. More of a runner and a speedster than a leaper. You know, I mean, he could throw down. But, yeah, what's been missing from Detroit is athleticism.
Right.
Troy Weaver has acquired all these guys that, you know, do their work below the rim. You know, Saddiq Bey, Saban Lee, Killian Hayes, Beef Stew. The only guy who is making plays above the rim is Hamidou Diallo. And then, you know, Cade operates there sometime, but he's primarily, he does most of his work, you know, lower to the floor, let's say, closer to the floor. So now we've suddenly got 3 guys to catch alley-oops and Jaden Ivey. So the energy is going to increase a lot, and they're going to be a lot funner to watch.
We're talking to our NBA and Pistons expert, the stats guru of Siddy Hall here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and Big Al Beaton is here as well. One more before I go back to Big Al. Do you believe in the notion, Siddy, that great players, which I think we can agree that Cade Cunningham will be, that great players can be improved and be even better when they don't do, you mentioned a few minutes ago, gosh, Cade had to do so much last year. Do you believe in the notion that when guys come in like an Ivy and other players, that where Cade does not maybe have to do so much, do you believe in the notion that can make him a better player?
Make Cade a better player, yeah, I think so. Well, Cade's going to be a better player, period, just by, you know, maturing and getting older. You know, last year combined, you know, the 3 big scorers, Grant, Cade, and Bey, they were not very productive. You know, Jerami was out half the year. Kelly Olynyk contributed almost nothing. And Saddiq had his cold spells.
Right.
Cade came out of the gates, you know, couldn't find a shot. I mean, we thought he was a great shooter, and he started out like 1 for 20 on threes. Those numbers are going to go up. The Pistons last year, their points per game differential was negative, of course, and 3/4 of that number came at the offensive end, which is, efficiency and how you shoot the ball. So you can expect that Cade, I'm still expecting him to get up to an elite status in terms of his shooting efficiency. How quickly will that take? Will it take 2 years, 3? Well, it's going to go in stages. But this year, we should see improvement. Bay should improve. The guy, Jaden Ivey is going to struggle, kind of neutralize some of those gains. But last year was a chance for Cade to improve his game, kind of like the way Devin Booker did in Phoenix. In his second year in Phoenix, they asked him to play point guard. And then, Chris Paul showed up, and now Devin Booker has a great handle from his year of point guard experience. So, Cade's all set. He's going to be awesome. The question is, we need to find out about Jaden Ivey, if he can, figure out how to score efficiently. Kind of the way like Russell Westbrook. Westbrook entered the league. It took him his third year is when he finally got his efficiency high enough that he wasn't a negative impact.
Right. Yeah. Let's bring Big Al in. What you got for Siddy?
Oh, let's touch on the other draft pick, Jalen Duren, the big center. Obviously, they picked him up. They released the rights to him, and they're in that very convoluted trade between the Hornets and the Knicks. But what's interesting about this is that apparently the Pistons had him very, very high in their draft board, and there was some, at least Weaver said, I don't know how much of this is actually true and how much is blowing smoke, but he was actually under consideration for the 5th pick, especially if Ivey wasn't there, which means the Pistons really did want this guy. And it's also interesting that Weaver has said, when they're asked about free agency, is that going for Aiton or Bridges is actually their plan B, and that getting Duren was their plan A. So it really seems like the Pistons are extremely high on this guy, and despite his extreme youth and the fact that he's still pretty darn raw. But I just want to get your thoughts on how this all went down and where you think, how you think Duren fits into this Weaver puzzle.
Yeah, well, Duren was a guy, I wasn't looking at his film. I had heard, people were talking about him a bit in the draft, but I was focusing on the top of the draft. Yeah. So I had to go back and look at film of him. And, he's kind of easier to analyze than Ivey. Yeah. Because, just in the limited scope of being a rim runner, as they say, and a shot blocker, rebounder, he's kind of easy to analyze. He looks like a guy who can do those things. And if you compare him to, say, like Robert Williams III on Boston, I get the impression that Duren has a little bit more offense than Williams.
Right.
Williams is just restricting himself just to offensive rebounds and dunks, which is okay, But if you look at Duren in his film, he's trying to shoot mid-range jumpers for better or worse. Kind of got a Kevin Garnett looking release for whatever, I don't know if the ball's going to go in that well. Garnett was an excellent mid-range shooter. The question with Duren is, will he develop a couple of moves where he can put the ball on the floor and go from 10 feet to dunking, That would put him near, closer to, all-star status if he can do that. Big if. Now, Greg, you and I communicated. You mentioned to me how Coach Dwayne Casey had mentioned Shawn Kemp. And I was struck by that because I had the same idea when looking at film of Duren, just in terms of his physical attributes, his body, his height, his springiness. Like, that guy looks a bit like Kemp. But I did go back and looked at film of Shawn Kemp's rookie season. I watched the game he played. We got to be careful with that comparison because Shawn Kemp was doing crazy things at the age of 20, spin moves and fake spin moves, 20 feet from the basket like a small forward, and getting to the rim and dunking. I mean, that's like a different level. But Duren does look like he can bring the basic modern attributes that every team wants. And, now we got 3 guys doing that, Noel and Bagley.
How important is passing for when you're analyzing a big man? How important is passing? And the reason I ask that question is because so much of the game is played in the perimeter with so many 3-point shots, and the traditional center that you and I and Al all grew up watching that's a relic. That's a thing of the past. But how important is passing for these young big guys when they get the ball? You mentioned, will he establish a move? Can he put the ball on the floor? But when it comes to just flat out passing the basketball, whether it's to a cutter or for a triple try, how important is that in the whole skill set of today's big man?
Well, if you want an easy comparison, just look at Marvin Bagley III. That's a guy, he's got blinders on, when he gets the ball. He has the ball in his hands a lot, and he's looking to score. He does not find his 3-point shooters. I think the Pistons were working on him on that. It looked like he was starting to do that a little bit. But if you're going to initiate offense, you have to find your shooters. Right. In today's NBA, those guys are sitting at the 3-point line. And if you don't, you're a negative.
Right.
If you can't do that, then you're just going to do the alley-oops and offensive rebounding. Right. So it really depends on the scope, how much you're going to try to do on offense,
Got it. Okay.
By the way, there was a guy who could pass the ball well. That was Ben Wallace. He did not have the ball in his hands very much, but he was pretty good at finding his teammates.
While we're talking about the lineup in this, who's going to play power forward? I mean, it's going to be Beef Stew. Is it going to be Bay? I think that's the one big question mark with the Pistons lineup.
That's a great question. I'm kind of thinking it will be Bagley next to Beef Stew. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are they going to go small ball? What are they going to do? They got so many bigs now.
Yeah.
Duren, I guess, is going to be playing with the Motor City Cruise a lot. So, but I don't know. Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah, I forgot. Right. I just forgot about Olynyk with his volumes. Yeah.
So. I'm guessing I'm just a guess. I say Beef Stew and Bagley side by side, but that's really hard.
If Stew can shoot the 3, I think that becomes a no-brainer. He is your power forward. I guess that's what it really comes down to. If he can stretch it out some, and they've been kind of selling us, he's working on that 3-point shot. He's working on that 3-point shot. This has got to be the year where I think Stewart has that 3-point shot. If he does, he's your power forward.
He's got a good stroke. And, Bagley, Bagley's kind of reminds me of like a poor man's Ralph Sampson.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's a guard inside of a very tall person's body. He wants to do all that stuff. Right. Bagley wants to bring the ball up. He wants to operate from the 3-point line. And he can do all those things a little bit. He's not crazy for thinking that. What I just want to see him not do is shoot the ball from 6 feet and 8 feet and do low post stuff. I mean, his numbers with Detroit were good. He was catching the alley-oops. His field goal percentage skyrocketed with Detroit. Gave up some of those 3-pointers for dunks. That really helps. By the way, we need to talk about Bagley because, one thing that we have not seen much from Troy Weaver is contract negotiations.
Right.
They've been so young. They let Christian Wood go. They let Kennard go. They let Jerami Grant go when all these guys were, up for contracts. So he's never negotiated those tricky, like, second deals where the numbers start changing a lot.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then we have all these rookies who are not there yet. In 2 years, it's going to be, as we said, Bay and Killian Hayes and Beef Stew. But with Bagley, now we've got one in front of him.
Yeah.
And that's, I mentioned that core group at the beginning of the show, those 11 guys. They have to figure out how to fit as many of those guys in under the cap and make it all work. So this is the first one. Yeah. And this is suddenly you don't know what the value is exactly. You have to negotiate it. So what is that number going to be with Marvin?
And you're basing it on 18 games played for your team too. That's the other thing.
And you're basing it on market value, what other teams are willing to offer, right? So I've been reading online. Some people are looking at that. What do they call that offer that they make to
qualifying
players?
offer?
The qualifying offer. Yes, qualifying was like 7.3, and I think people are confused by that. They're using that as like a basis of what the deal is going to look like. It has nothing to do with it. That's just the deal that Bagley can accept if he wants, and then become an unrestricted free agent next year.
Right.
But I'm assuming that the price point is going to start above the MLE, the non-taxpayer mid-level exemption, which I believe is about $12 million. I mean, his representative should be able to go to the Pistons and say, hey, we can sign for that with another team. Give us more. Yeah. So then the question is going to be how much more and for how long. My hope, if I could magically make it all happen, I hope they sign him for the 4 years, as long as they can, 4 years for about 13 or 14 a year. If they do that, and then have the largest amount year one, and then have it go down incrementally. So the fourth year, it's going to be the cheapest part of the deal when they're trying to sign these other guys. But I think like 13 million a year. His price went up. He had a good stretch with the Pistons. Everybody saw that. Right.
Let's kind of shove the calendar ahead a year. In this whole grand scheme, Al mentioned, how do certain players fit the Troy Weaver plan? If the Pistons, City, kind of accidentally make their way into the playoffs next year, because I don't know what the game plan is for this coming year in terms of where they want to be. But let's say everybody kind of has a better year than we think, and they bump into the playoffs and they don't get a lottery pick. Is that detrimental to the plan? Or are we now at the point where it's beyond needing lottery picks that it's like if you get a lottery pick, great. If you don't, great. If the Pistons were to make the playoffs next year, is that a bad thing or a good thing?
It's a good thing. They're going to try and win, But they did signal, though, by trading Grant, they lessened their chances to make the playoffs. So they said, okay, we would like to make the playoffs, but we're not hell-bent on it. So, they want to see progress, Right. They're not going to win the championship, so they don't have to make short-term deals. But, bringing in Noel and Burks is also a signal that they're going to try and stabilize the situation. Dwayne Casey has been excellent at getting production out of guys like Alec Burks. You look at Corey Joseph. He's been playing the best basketball of his career. DeLon Wright played the best basketball of his career in Detroit very briefly. Wayne Ellington played the best basketball of his career. The guy's got a Midas touch, and I expect that Alec Burks is going to get comfortable and play good basketball and make contributions. If they stay healthy, Cade has those. We got a franchise player there. It looks like.
I'm glad you mentioned the Knicks. We almost forgot to talk about the Knicks trade. Burks, the knock on the team, even after all of this splashy stuff that happened last week with the Grant trade and the draft and everything that happened, you still came away with the thought that despite all that, and that was exciting and it got the fan base charged up, there still was this elephant in the room, which was they can't shoot. And they can't shoot three-pointers as well as other teams in the NBA. Now they get Burks, who shot 40% from behind the arc last year and has been a pretty good three-point shooter, albeit he's been getting better. What about that aspect of the game? I mean, everybody we're talking about isn't really a good three-point shooter, except for Bay, of course. But what about Burks now? Does he kind of settle that down? And does he start, or does he come off the bench?
Well, ideally he comes off the bench, but they're probably going to rely on him a lot because there is a shortage of three-point shooting. Saddiq Bey is, on the paper he struggled last year. Same with Cade, but those are supposed to be two of the guys, and that they don't have much more. They let Frank Jackson go, which surprised me. I thought they were gonna, it was a team option, $3 million. and they just said no, thank you. He had a nice corner three. Yeah, there's a shortage on 3-point shooters for sure. It's going to be an issue, especially with Jaden Ivey. I mean, that guy's got to work on that. If you watch him with Purdue, he had one game he shot 6 for 6 last year, but in general, he puts up a lot of bricks. But it's okay. Let him work on it. Let him iron it out. Let him work on all that stuff and see if he can. There are a lot of guys who are not pure shooters who learn how to shoot the three reasonably well. Getting back to Burks, they're going to be reliant. You have to have 3-point shooters, Right. Or the defense is just, even like Jaden Ivey, that's going to be a problem. You watch, the league is going to let him shoot next year.
Right.
When they do that pick and roll, the guy covering him is going to go underneath and just invite him to shoot until he can prove that he can do that.
Sure.
So that's going to be a little bit of a problem. But we're looking long term, right? We want long term. We have excitement. So there are a lot of good things going on. But Detroit does look like, just like last year, they might be one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league.
Well, you mentioned we're looking at the long term. What's really kind of encouraging is that not only are we, as fans and as people who cover the team, looking at the long term, but the general manager is looking at the team in the long term, and that's encouraging because so often we've had folks here in Detroit, Van Gundy was probably the worst of them all, who did not have that vision, did not have a plan. Nobody really knew what he was up to. He kept churning the roster, but there really was no you didn't get the feeling there was a plan with Van Gundy. It was just everything was kind of short-sighted and kind of frenetic. And, the Blake Griffin thing, which Tom Gores should never have signed off on. I don't know what Gores was thinking to sign. Van Gundy.
He listened to his general manager. He listened to his general manager. His general manager said. But the general manager was halfway out the door. He was halfway out the door. He said we need a franchise player, and he believed that Blake Griffin was that guy. And when the Clippers received that phone call, they're like, "What? Oh, someone thinks that. Okay."
I mean, statistically, Griffin had his best year ever, which was kind of ironic, but it didn't lessen the blow of how bad of a move that was. Gores should never have signed off on that. I mean, he had to have known, but that trade was made in February. He had to have known that Van Gundy was on his last legs. I mean, I don't think he woke up one day at the end of the year and decided to fire Stan. I think he knew Stan was on his way out. Why he signed off on that, Gores, I have no idea. That set the franchise back who knows how many years, but it happened.
Well, I'm going to back up Gores though. If you look now though, he has, instead of panicking and changing coaches and
he's learned from that. I think
he's doing I like the job he's been doing with he talked Casey into coming. That was some salesmanship. The guy must be a good talker.
Yeah, that and $6 million a year doesn't hurt either. That's a good chunk of change for him, especially for a team in the shape it's in now. But they kind of touch on a little bit more of the Knicks trade, where they picked up Noel and Burks. What I found interesting about that trade is, one, they're both very useful rotation pieces. They would play on most teams in the NBA. And what I found, when it comes to roster management, though, when people were saying, well, yeah, sure, I bet you Weaver will find a couple of veterans he'll sign as free agent, as you said, that can play, settle things down when needed. But the thing is, though, to get the comparable players to Noel and Burks in free agency, it's probably going to take you a 2 or 3 year deal. In this case, he traded for the guys, and he gets them on essentially 1 year deals. I find it fascinating. In the way he's managing this roster, how he's thinking just 1 year at a time. He's not locking up any kind of serious money long term. And as you said, when SVG signed players like this, they were overpaid and got overtermed as well. And we're seeing the complete opposite of this from Weaver.
Yeah, SVG, he signed, remember John Lure got about $8 or $10 million a year.
For 3 years or whatever it was, yeah.
Sean, was it Meeks? Got
Meeks.
about the same. Jody Meeks. And everybody, got $10 million a year,
for 2 to 3 years. Yeah, exactly.
So now, this was a thinking man move, because Nerlens Noel missed, most of last year. He took like 4 shots a game or something. Mm-hmm. It's like he fell off the earth almost. Yeah. But when Troy Weaver was in Oklahoma City, Nerlens Noel had the best year of his career. That was 3 years ago during the Chris Paul era. Chris Paul is the king of Lob City, right?
Yeah, yeah.
With the Clippers, he was Lob City. He went to Oklahoma City, and Dennis Schroeder suddenly was great. And Nerlens Noel easily had the best year of his career. So Weaver saw that with his own eyes. It was only 3 years ago. He went from Oklahoma City to New York, a couple of years there. And it's still fresh in his mind. Nerlens Noel is an elite shot blocker. He's also a ball hawk, and he catches alley-oops. So if you have guys that can lob the ball, and it looks like we do with Cade and hopefully Ivy, he can add some offense, and then hopefully he stays healthy, right?
You're right.
But bear in mind, both these guys, Burks and Nerlens Noel, they're going to be playing extremely hard. They want to get that team option.
Oh, of course.
Both of them have a team option for $9 or $10 million. Especially Noel, he got screwed out of money. Mm-hmm. Many years when he was in Dallas, he was offered 4 years for $70 million. He was ready to sign, and then that Rich Paul. The story is Rich Paul heard about it and said, "Oh, you should come and join us."
Yeah.
He signed for 1 year.
Mm-hmm. I remember hearing that story. Yep.
Unrestricted free agent, and then you'll get max money. And then Noel got hurt, and he was playing for like minimum wage contracts for in the middle of his career instead of $17 million a year. He lost so much money. So this contract right now is huge to him.
That's a good point. That's another genius move. A genius part of that move is that incentive that these guys have, and they get out of New York, which is a nightmare. The Knicks are a mess. They're a wreck. And so now you come into a situation where the team is on the uprise. You're going to get some minutes. You're going to get a chance, like Siddy said, to prove yourself and get big money, whether it's with Detroit or not. And whether it's with Detroit or not, the Pistons get those two guys for at least 1 year, like Siddy mentioned, almost like a buffer, settle things down. It just is really encouraging to see a plan finally take hold, and like you said, Al, not be tempted to go to divert from the plan, not get not having somebody dangle something in front of you, and you kind of make a move that is not in the best interest. He's really Weaver is really showing, like Siddy said, some patience and financial restraint, and it's just
unlike the Knicks.
Yeah. Well, I think about this next year, they're going to have options, because we already talked about how 3 of these guys are going to be exiting their rookie deal, and that same time is when those contracts are up. So if it looks like Burks and Noel are helping out enough, and everyone's talking about, they're going to have all this money next year. Well, maybe they're just going to keep these placeholders and keep those guys for 2 years, and then when that second year expires, that's when they sign the young guys.
Right.
And then they can reassess the financial situation. Really, how much money do we have? How much money is Duren going to cost in a couple of years? We know Cade's going to cost a lot. Fiscal, constraint, right?
Real quick, before I let you go, what about this is all well and good, but what about this? There's this whisper that goes around the NBA that says nobody of any worth is really going to ever sign in Detroit as a free agent. I hear that a lot. I believe that players want to win. If they feel like they go in a situation where they can win a ring, that's where they'll go. I don't want to hear anything about, it's bad weather and bad winters. They'll go there if there is a chance to put a ring on your finger. But there's still a lot of folks, Siddy, that believe that Detroit is just not a destination.
Yeah, who thought that way? Stan Van Gundy.
Yeah.
That's why he was a terrible GM. He showed up and said nobody wants to come here. Well, everyone answered Joe Dumars' phone calls. Mm-hmm. His free agents didn't work, but people would come. So anyway, to answer your question, of course not. People will come to Detroit. These guys live the lives of kings. Mm-hmm. These guys make so much money, and they live in a bubble. It doesn't matter if they're living in Detroit or Cleveland or Oklahoma City or Phoenix. They're there for 6 months or 8 months, living in some incredible apartment,
right.
Living in their bubble, right. Going to games on private planes, staying in the best hotels.
Right.
They really live the lives of rock stars and kings. And then in the off season, they go to wherever they want to go for 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. No big deal. They can come to Detroit. If they have a chance to win, if they have a good organization, they'll do it.
Good. That's what I want to hear. And here I thought you were going to bring us all down, and you didn't do it. Shame on me. Thanks, Siddy Hall.
Once in a while. Hey, I'm proud of the D. Yeah. I'm proud of the D.
Well, and honestly, I'd rather be talking about the Pistons than whatever the hell the Knicks are doing right now. I'm still trying. Jalen Brunson, nice player, but building a team around him, that makes no sense.
I went on Reddit, and one Knicks fan wrote, "Oh, great! We have a 5'8" point guard making $27 million a year." Yeah, exactly. It was financial restraint. A few months ago, Detroit was obviously one of the teams that seemed like they could use a guy like him as a replacement for Killian Hayes. Mm-hmm. But why tie up the money?
Yeah.
That's how you lose. When you overpay for these guys. And that includes stars. Whenever you talk about players, it's always the player versus the contract. When Damian Lillard signed his Supermax deal with Portland, and I am the world's biggest Damian Lillard fan, love the guy. And the moment I read that, I go, well, that's it for Portland. They're not going to win a title. Too much money tied up in one guy.
Chauncey Billups has his hands full. That's for sure.
Say the least.
Siddy, thanks for joining us. It was a lot of fun. This was I knew we were going to have lots to talk about, and we did. And we'll bring it back as we get closer to the start of the regular season. After some of this stuff is maybe some of these answers to some of these questions that we had tonight might be answered. We'll bring it back maybe sometime October, November. How's that sound?
Well, what about Summer League in Vegas? It starts next week, I think, or in 2 weeks.
You got your plane ticket bought? You got your plane ticket purchased?
It might be worth talking about maybe when we get our first glance at some of at Ivey and Duren in Summer League. It might be worth touching base after that just to get your thoughts on how you thought they played.
All right, sounds good. And awesome. I think the season starts in October these days. It's hard to remember these bubble seasons, but I think they open up in October. So if we don't talk before then, guys, take it easy, all right? And thank you for having me.
Yeah, take care, my friend. Good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, now question 3 of the birthday game. Oh, wait a second. We're not doing that this week. All right. But, it's just absolutely amazing that how much this team's roster has flipped in 3 seasons to where it was old and overpaid, and now it's one of the youngest in the league with massive amounts of cap room, and and when it's exciting. I guess when you said that they have a plan and they're following it, and it seems like for years this team just was floating around without a plan, without any kind of thought to the future. There's kind of drifting from season to season, hoping to make an 8 seed. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. And if they did get an 8 seed, they get blown out in the first round anyway. And now there's a plan in place. If a guy who's not afraid to make controversial moves, he's swinging. I like that Weaver swings for the fences, and a lot of his moves, Greg, he's thinking 3, 4, 5 moves down the line, and we saw that with the reaction to the Jerami Grant trade, how this all started a couple weeks ago, where he made the trade. People lost their minds about, oh my God, what's he doing? And the next thing you know, people are like, 2 weeks later, oh, that's what he was going to do. And it seems like every offseason we get this with Weaver. People freak out, and then they remember, oh, he's thinking, 3 chess moves away compared to half the NBA. It's fascinating.
Well, you know what, too, Al? You mentioned the getting blown out in the first round. I get the feeling like because there is a plan in place, and because the fans are seemingly all in on this, if they do accidentally make the playoffs next year, we don't know if they will, but if they do somehow make the playoffs, they'll probably make it as a lower seed. That's fine. Yeah. I don't think the fan base will if they do get blown out in 4 straight next year. I don't think the fan base will look at that the same way they looked at it in 19
when
they got blown out in 4 straight, because they're just like what you said. There's you had at the time you had that, like you mentioned, the aging overpaid roster in cap space hell. And now you've got a much brighter future with lots of room for growth. And so if and they're still a very, very, very young team. So if they go next year, make the playoffs, and get blown out in 4 straight, I don't think that's going to have the same effect on the psyche of the fan base, because they'll say, okay, that's okay. One step at a time, we'll get them next year. So I think that's another thing that the Pistons have bought as an organization is they've bought some much needed faith. Yeah. And let's face it, this town needs a team to have some faith in. Yeah. But the fan base, I think, is buying into this, just like they're buying into the Lions situation.
Yeah, they're buying into the Lions, they're buying into the Wings, and they're buying into the Pistons, and, well, the Tigers we'll talk about in the next show.
Yeah. Right.
But, yeah, it's odd seeing, we haven't seen this. It's weird to say he's a competent GM. And it sounds like a backhanded compliment or not a big thing, but from what we've seen of the last, almost 15 years here in Detroit, saying the Pistons have a competent GM, that's a huge compliment. I mean, he knows what he's doing. And how often do we talk about if you want to see a GM who can, if not fleece another team, at least get the better of a deal? And we're seeing it over and over again with Al Avila and if the Tigers. He just doesn't seem to have that edge where he's creative enough or thoughtful enough where he can take advantage of another team. And I think with Weaver, and for that matter, Steve Yzerman, we're seeing that they're able to pounce on another team's weakness or a soft spot that they have to fix and jump in with an offer they can't refuse that really helps. It helps the other team some, like we're seeing with the Knicks. The Knicks were so desperate to clear cap room, the Pistons are like, we'll be more than happy to help you. And the Pistons are going to make out like bandits in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, anything else you want to add before we start?
No.
Before we, I guess especially we hit the bricks.
No, I'm good.
All right. With that, then let's get the hell out of here, Greg. So, anything you want to tell us about any upcoming shows or anything else you need to? Any teasers, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, I would say that we will be joined by Red Wings radio play-by-play guy Kenny Cal on the July 26th program. Not sure who we'll have for you, if anyone, on our next program, which we'll tape right around July 11th, whatever it is, 12th. But we will have Kenny on the 26th. We'll talk Red Wings. By that time, I'm guessing they'll have a new coach. Yeah. And we can talk about that. And maybe by that time, free agency will have begun and players will have been signed. And so we'll talk about that with Kenny. But not sure who we'll have.
People, I just threw Greg a softball, and he hit it out of the park with Ken Cal. So that was exactly what I was aiming for. All right. With that, though, let me get a couple other things out of the way here. Oh, and don't forget, tell everyone they can find us on social media.
Yeah, just the usual places. Really, the usual place. Yeah. Follow us on Twitter at The Knee Jerks. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. And check me out on my WordPress Out of Bounds blog every Monday, generally every Monday. Yep. Just Google Greg Eno Out of Bounds, and you'll find it. And check me out there. And, of course, here on The Knee Jerks, which is where Al's going to tell you how to get to that.
Exactly. You want to listen to the show? We're out the usual podcasty places. You can do a search for The Knee Jerks, do a search for Eno and Big Al. You'll be able to find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. Pretty much any place you can find a podcast, you can subscribe to The Knee Jerks podcast through that service. We're on the kneejerks.net. That is the homepage. We have it for another year. I just renewed it today. So that is the mothership. You find all the show notes. You'll find all the links. You want to directly download the MP3 of the show, you'll find it there. Also, I think that pretty much about covers it until our next episode. Who knows what we'll be talking about? Well, actually, we'll likely be talking about the NHL draft. We'll be probably yelling more about the Tigers. And hopefully we may have a little bit of Wings news when it comes to a head coach. So there'll be a lot to talk about and who knows what the Pistons will be up to by that point. Hell, no, free agency starts, tomorrow? Who knows what the Pistons will be up to? Troy Weaver's probably rubbing his hands together right now, looking for someone to take advantage of. But until that time, though, Greg, I think we need to get the hell out of here so you can have a cocktail and I get the editing. So until this time 2 weeks from now, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, Italy, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.